and welcome to today's seminar. Thanks for joining, and I've been looking down the chat. I've been joining from all over the world, so welcome to everybody. It's great to have you here. Now we've been doing a long series of seminars, and this is a group of 3 that we've been doing with Workday. So if you've missed the first one, don't worry, we'll send you some links, and we're recording this session as well, so you can watch it again or share it with some colleagues at a later date. And then we've got another seminar with Workday coming up at a later date, and then we'll also share that date with you and how to register at the end. So don't worry, you can watch them all back on demand. If you go to the CIPS YouTube channel, you'll see this series and many more there as well. So catch up on anything that you've missed. So look, we want to make today's session as interactive as possible. So please submit your questions in the Q&A box. Keep that chat going, make some new connections today. Find out a little bit about what some of your peers are doing from across the world, and keep those connections going. So it's great to network, even if it is virtually. So yes, keep that going. And don't forget, don't leave all your questions to the last minute as well. So I'll try and get through as many as possible. So get in there first and nice and early as well. So today's seminar is kindly sponsored by Workday. And this is our second our seminar. So high performing procurement part 2. Like I said, if you want to catch up on part 1, we'll send you the link for that. And today we're going to be talking about managing and expanding the strategic role of procurement. And I guess the last nearly 2 years that we're up to now from the pandemic have been a real exciting and challenging times for procurement. The spotlight has most definitely been on procurement teams all over the world, and you've certainly risen to the challenge. We've seen dozens and dozens of case studies come through our Supply Management magazine, through our awards, of all the great stuff that you've been achieving during this time, keeping your organizations going, or whatever efforts it is you've been contributing to the pandemic and supporting people. So really well done. I guess now the challenge is we've got that spotlight. How do we continue to keep that elevated interest in procurement? And lots of people I've spoken to have said they've never been to so many board meetings or been asked to do so many board reports during this time. So it's great to have the profile, but I guess it's how we keep that going. So today we're going to be talking about high performing procurement, and particularly around the expanding strategic role. So first of all, let's get started, and I'd like to introduce one of our sponsors today from Workday, and that's Alex Yakubovich, who is General Manager of Spend Management at Workday. Hi, Alex. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you. How are you? Thanks for having me, Emma.
No, you're welcome. So it's probably a bit sunnier where you are today. It's quite a rainy day here today. So you're in California.
Yeah, well, it's only 7 a.m., so it's not too sunny yet, but it will be.
It will be.
It will be.
It's definitely a damp day here for us today. But yeah, thanks for joining us. And thanks very much for Workday for supporting these seminars. They've been fascinating so far. So Alex, tell us a little bit about you and your role at Workday.
Sure. So I'm originally from Cleveland, Ohio, and my started with a couple of co-founders, a company called Scout RFP, which some of you may remember. It's now Workday Strategic Sourcing. The whole idea behind it was we spoke to a lot of people in procurement. This was a number of years ago, and we found out that a lot of the issues with automation was the fact that a lot of people wanted to do more automation, but things were just the software that was available was difficult to use. Mm-hmm. And so we worked to make software that was incredibly easy to implement and incredibly easy to adopt and use and love. And so that ended up being really great. And we grew a pretty sizable group of customers, one of which was John Darino, who's been a repeat customer of ours since then. And we've grown it. And then a few years ago, it was acquired by Workday.
Excellent, thanks. And over the last 18 months, what changes have you noticed when it comes to businesses sourcing priorities? I mean, these have really been unprecedented times, haven't they?
They have been, yeah. Well, noticed a few things, and some of them are are pretty well documented in the Harvard white paper that we put out, along with a number of other really great consulting firms like that are cited in there. But effectively, here are the big things that we've seen. One is, I mean, as everybody's seen, it's been a lot of supply chain challenges across the board. But the other big thing that has been a huge challenge is that all of our work styles have changed. So, clearly I'm working from a home office, and I was very much in the office person before. A lot of our customers are in the office every day. A lot of our customers aren't. But if before you could work without automating a lot of different work things, and kind of get away with it because you could go down the hall, grab somebody, really interact with people, swivel your chair around. I really miss those days. You can't really do that anymore. And so now what we're all much more managing towards is impact. And because of the speed of how things are moving and globalization continues to, of course, only accelerate, it's been more and more important. And so, we did a study, and this is in the white paper as well, but it's like 45% of procurement leaders said that they're accelerating their digitization of their procurement stack. And it was going pretty fast before. So the fact that 45% of procurement leaders are accelerating that is pretty telling. And then there's Eloise Epstein, who's a procurement expert at and has written a ton on procurement and from A.T. Kearney. She says within 3 to 5 years, most procurement tasks will be automated. And a lot of times you see these predictions and you get kind of skeptical, but we're seeing a rate of automation that we just haven't seen before. And we're seeing that show up in things that we haven't seen before. Like resumes are now if you look at or job postings and resumes, people are talking about what technologies have been implemented and how important they are. So I think those are probably the biggest things that we've seen, just to focus on automation and impact.
No, definitely. And that definitely echoes what I'm hearing and seeing too. I mean, budgets were pretty tight, I guess, as business contracted and the economy was really quite hit during the pandemic. But it seems that investment in IT, as much as possible, has really been driven forward. And like you say, that the need for greater connectivity, whether that's either with our staff or with suppliers and customers, I think it is driving a great deal of that change. It's not something that you can stand still with technology, can you? Definitely
No.
not. And how has the Workday strategic sourcing platform helped manage change and expand the role of procurement? I mean, you talked briefly at the end there about that so much can be automated, and I guess that doesn't really mean that we'll all be extinct dinosaurs. Obviously, we'll move on to do much more strategic stuff.
Yeah, that is exactly right. And I think that's a really great message too. The biggest thing, and this kind of speaks to when we started Scout, and it could very much try to continue. You can see my 4-year-old in the background. Yeah, but you can, the biggest thing is we really wanted to build something that was easy to implement quickly. And we did that because that was the software that we would want to use, something that could be up and running quickly, very usable. But then during the last 18 months, that's been just a big business need. And so, we continue to focus on making very usable, very quick to implement, high time, or I should say low time to value software. And that's been really important. And the other thing is just, being able to enable folks like John to leverage tools to get their jobs done in a more automated fashion for the administrative things, so that they could focus on the strategic things. If that's been the other big thing, is just supply chain challenges have made it so much harder for us to do our work. Anything that could help us do the day-to-day and help us focus on strategy has been super helpful.
Absolutely, because I think change has just been so rapid and unpredictable, and the environment we're operating on is so volatile. So I guess anything that frees up resources for procurement people to really be monitoring their environment and trying to predict what will come up next. Some things are really impossible to predict, but being ready and agile and having the resources available to act on that, I think this is really critical. So as much automation as possible would be key to that. Excellent. Now,
Absolutely.
you mentioned John there, and we're going to invite John to come in because John Darino is Senior Director of Global Sourcing at Vyaire Medical, and they're a client of Workday. So we always encourage case studies to see how effective this working is. So John's come in as Alex's case study here today. So welcome, John. Thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's great to be here and to reconnect with Alex and this broader group of professionals. It's a great time to be in strategic sourcing. I think our profession has never been more in demand and has never been more really needed by business, and definitely feeling the value of our role. But yeah, just to quickly introduce myself, I'm the Senior Director of Global Sourcing at Vyaire Medical. Vyaire is a medical device manufacturer and consumable supplier focusing on respiratory care. So our main products are actually ventilators, which has led to quite a crazy time during this pandemic. My team is about 21 professionals. We have a split of about 8 people working on the indirect sourcing side, and then the remaining team is focused on the direct materials side. So both functions report up to me. And then Vyaire as a company, we've got about 7 manufacturing facilities located globally. Our corporate headquarters is in Mettawa, which is Mettawa, Illinois. It's just outside of Chicago, which is close to where I'm located. And then we've got about 2,500 active suppliers that we manage. So huge supply base, relatively complex devices, broad group of stakeholders, and we've been working with Workday sourcing since I started at Vyaire. So I've been at Vyaire for about 2.5 years, and I've brought Workday sourcing in is one of the first things I've done because it's one of those quick ways to really elevate the maturity of a sourcing organization. It's got a lot of the out of the box solutions that we really need to make ourselves a more professional organization. But before joining Vyaire, I was actually a consultant for many years, and that's where I first was introduced to, at the time it was Scout RFP, and Alex. So we go way back, and I've actually helped implement the solution with 2 other clients before joining Vyaire. And as soon as it became my org, it was very clear for me that this is something that I need to get my team up to speed and to really be able to leverage the true platform to let us focus on strategic things.
Excellent. Sounds good. No, and as you rightly say at the beginning, I mean, it's a great time to be in procurement. It's a challenging time, most certainly, but it's an exciting time as well. And the spotlight is most definitely on us all. Ongoing change and disruption is definitely becoming the norm, and it looks like it's set to continue. You know, we've seen inflation, hyperinflation, availability of supplies being an issue, price fluctuations like we've never seen before. How can CPOs partner with the business to remain agile despite this disruption? John, do you want to take that?
Yeah, it's a great question. So for me, I think the most important thing is developing a really deep understanding of your supply chain. We learned this during the pandemic as we're trying to ramp up ventilator production. The understanding of your tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 supply chain, where your bottlenecks are, what's driving cost. It allows you to become really the true expert to the business on your supply chain. And I think that's needed more now than ever, where the business is turning to us to understand what is happening. And tools like Workday Strategic Sourcing allow us to kind of put some of that tactical activity through automation and focus really on being the experts that we need to be for the business.
Excellent. Alex, do you want to add anything to that?
I completely agree with that. And we've been talking about that at procurement, seminars, and we go to a lot of conferences, or at least used to go to a lot of conferences, and there was a lot of talk about the practices, but we've never really had to do them before. And now we see our customers really like stepping up to go much deeper and understand their suppliers and go out to a much broader range of suppliers as well, knowing that at any one point, like 1, 2, 3, a number of them could be falling down, or they might have to multi-source. So it's been really interesting to see the level of procurement, and particularly the strategic sourcing with supply chain issues, just skyrocket. So yeah, completely agree. And Emma, to your point, yeah, it's like challenge after challenge after challenge. We've also seen some, and I think procurement has been more and more in demand, but I think we've seen some supply chain folks just say, I can't do this anymore because of the level of challenges that just continue to escalate. But for a lot of folks, it has made this profession so much more interesting because of the level to which it's been elevated.
Cool. And I guess that that level of automation to take some of that noise away, to give you the headspace to get a greater understanding, like you say, John, that depth of understanding. It's not easy. The further you go down the tiers to get that level of understanding and depth, it is not easy, and it is time consuming. So yeah, having the resources available. Exactly.
Just to add to that, so I think it's kind of humorous to reflect now on how the needs of our organization have changed. I remember in December of 2019, we actually used Workday Strategic Sourcing to facilitate a survey of our supply chain in China to understand the impact of the coronavirus in Wuhan and our supply base there. Reflecting on it, you can kind of chuckle and say, oh yeah, that's what we thought the problem was at that moment. Turns out we were way off, but it was, using technology like Workday Strategic Sourcing at least gives us an understanding of the supply chain and allows us to focus on digesting that information, processing that information, and being the experts for the business.
Excellent. So cost management is also another one of the CPO's top priorities right now. And will continue to be, I guess, for the foreseeable future. I mean, these are difficult times we're all operating in. How can the procurement function strategically drive cost reduction whilst also optimizing spend? John, can I ask you that one first?
Yeah, so it is a difficult time to talk about cost reduction given the inflationary environment. But I think the fundamental key to success here is still the same. It's building stronger relationships with fewer suppliers and consolidating your business and really trying to leverage your spend the best you can across your organization. And that also helps not only for cost savings, but it's key to being able to ensure continuity of supply. You want to have these deep relationships. And I think what's really key to that is building a strong understanding of your business needs and making sure that you have the right supply base, the right group of preferred suppliers that your business really needs, and you're able to kind of steer the volume. For us, it's difficult with so many manufacturing locations. I think similar to some other companies, but we have so many stakeholders that we have to guide to those right suppliers. So understanding their needs, understanding who the right supply base is, and then kind of proactively communicating your preferred supplier list is really critical. So I think it all comes down to making sure you have that consolidated supply base and you drive business towards it. Leverage is key right now.
And have you found that suppliers are more open to have conversations around costs and really getting the breakdown of where things can be optimized and improved and efficiencies can be made?
Yeah, absolutely. I think now more than ever, it's important to really understand what the cost structure is and have those joint process improvement discussions, because it typically, it can be a black hole. When we design a product, unless we're collaborating strongly with the supplier that has the manufacturing expertise, it's hard to understand how those design elements really impact the product cost. And suppliers are now coming to us saying, hey, we're experiencing cost increases on resin, but there are other grades, there are other things that you can do to help mitigate that cost. So it does really come back to those supplier relationships and building the strongest ones you can.
And Alex, how can the Workday tools help the CPOs kind of look at their priorities in terms of cost management?
Definitely. Well, so the first thing is we have something called Pipeline, which is designed exactly for this. And it's, once you know where your costs are, you can put together effectively a project list of all of your projects, what the opportunity size is, who could be assigned to, and then you have a queue, and it makes automation so much easier because then you can just pull projects down and execute on them. And then the biggest thing that allows you to do is now have agility. And so as your teams change, as your priorities change, as folks do different things within companies, you have one place to go where you can see what the pipeline is, see what the next project is, see what's happened in that project before, what's been done historically, and then just drive that to a faster conclusion. So that's number one. The second thing, and we talked about this a little bit, is that so many things have changed so quickly. Before, where you used to get cost savings, you might not be able to because of inflationary pressure, and so you got to look for it somewhere else. And it's been a real test of agility for a lot of our customers. And so if you have an automated platform like Workday Strategic Sourcing, you could be so much faster at seeing everything in one place and moving on it. Whereas if you're doing it manually or didn't have a way to see that, it would be, you're scrambling.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it just having that overview, that dashboard, if you like, helps highlight some of the areas of focus, prioritizing your areas and resources. Great stuff. How can CPOs leverage technology to help manage increased demand with less resources? What about that one?
I'll let John answer that one, but
go on then, John.
It seems like companies continue to grow, but sourcing teams don't grow at nearly the same pace.
Yeah.
So I've always been baffled at how folks like John manage it.
It's interesting. So there's that's the other piece of this new world that we live in. Is resources are really, you've got to prioritize correctly. It's hard to get people. There's just a lot of knowledge retention that you need to be concerned with as people move to new positions. But I think what's important, and we've kind of touched on it a bit, is the really things that are not value add by sourcing professionals. We want to automate as much as possible so we can get the most out of the team to increase the kind of the bandwidth for sourcing. So things like, we use Workday Strategic Sourcing to help do our bid analysis, to expedite supplier communication, to help us track our savings and projects. All of that stuff frees up the team to be more strategic and really helps us increase the bandwidth. The other piece, I think, is it's really important, and Alex just touched on it, to be able to prioritize in this current state. So we use the pipeline functionality to help us kind of load in all of our projects, keep line of sight to what it is that we're working on, and make sure that we're working on the projects that are really valued by the organization. This was really critical for us in spring of 2020, is we had to put everything on hold. We basically stopped our cost out initiatives and focused on supply management, and that would have stopped a lot of progress, but we were able to kind of pick up some of those projects and reprioritize when things settled down a little bit. We've kind of secured our demand. So yeah, I think it's important. Really, the two pieces I see is you need technology to help you prioritize, and you need technology to automate those non-value added functions, so you get the most out of your team.
And I guess with this information, really, more information, you can report back to your key stakeholders on progress, how things are going, recognize where your pinch points are, reschedule resources as and when you need to. I'm getting the feeling that that's what you can get out of this tool as well.
Yeah. Absolutely. To that point, I think every sourcing person's dream is where you have stakeholders feed you with all of the information you need, and they kind of help really build out what your project is. And that's one of the great tools, and one of the great functionalities is you're able to add these stakeholders to your projects. So instead of having to email 15 people to get your specs, your volumes, you can add them, and they can actually put it into the project at the same time as you, and you can add notes. So that saves a lot of time, because you really put the ownership where it belongs with those specific functions.
Yeah, and then everyone sees real-time updates on where you are in progress. Because I many moons ago worked in procurement, and we used to have a whole team that would just pull together reports that were out of date by the time you've actually pulled them together. So having that real-time access as and when you need it, great visibility on how things are going. Great. We've got a few questions coming through. I've got one more of mine, and then we'll get to some of the questions that are coming through now. So make sure you pop them in the Q&A so I don't miss them. I can see some coming through on the chat. I'll try and pick them all up. So with the acceleration of digitalization, how can businesses pivot their operations to act more quickly in the face of constant change and disruption? Can you share any examples of how enterprises might need to make changes to their solutions in such situations? John, do you want to pick that up?
You want me to take that?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. One of the things that we're trying to do to be able to adapt at a quicker pace is we actually use the pipeline functionality to track all of our headwinds. It's unfortunate that we're getting price increases as consistent as they are, but what we've realized is it's critical that we're able to communicate those material price increases on the front end to our commercial side. So we think it's really important to understand where they're coming from, how significant the impact is, and then communicate that to the business so they can make pricing decisions with the best information possible. I think in the past, it's common for this pricing reset cycle to be annual, and in this current market, it can't be. Otherwise, companies will go bankrupt, because you have resins and transportation costs moving upwards at paces we've never seen before. It is critical to get that information to the commercial side as fast as possible. And we also use that information, kind of looking at it holistically, to see where our risks for increases are. We do see that there are gaps where we haven't seen the increases that we know are driven by the commodities that we should. Where we're purchasing something that's heavy in resin, or something that's reliant on transportation costs, and those particular suppliers, we love working with them, but we know that there is a risk to the business that we might see some increases. So we can start to socialize the concept of where we're expecting increases in the future. So I think it's really important to condense that cycle for pricing in this inflationary market.
Excellent. Alex, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, the ability to, and this is just about getting creative around where you're going, but it does mean more work. And so the more you can automate around what you're doing, to what you were talking about earlier, if your costs are going up, you have to look for the savings in other places, or you have to look for a new way to get something. That means looking at logistics, That means looking at packaging. That means looking at things that before you would just go to a supplier and you would expect the supplier to do that. And to the other thing is what John was saying, collaboration has been more and more huge. So folks want to get, the key here is getting the information and the data to all the stakeholders quickly. And now a lot of times our biggest partners are our suppliers, where before we were asking for price concessions, and now we're doing a lot more collaborating with them on like, okay, well, we get that the material costs are going up. So what else do we have to work with to make sure that we can lower some of the risks here? But all of that takes a lot of effort. And so if you have your question was around digitization. If it's in one place and you can see it and you can impact it, and you could do that through a technology platform, I mean, it just increases the agility of your organization exponentially.
Excellent. Okay, I'm going to go to some questions that we've had come through. Eva said, does Workday include data analytics to inform decision making in the development of strategies to combat global supply chain uncertainties? So we've touched on that a bit. Alex, do you want to pick that up?
Sorry, it was just pretty loud in my background. Can you just?
Yes, sure, no problem. Does Workday include data analytics to inform decision making in the development of strategies to combat global supply chain uncertainties?
That's a really great question. The short answer is not really. We're more of a automation platform. And so when looking at external data, what we do allow is internally within the Workday platform, we have really good analytics in terms of how the things that you were saying before, which is, generating the reports of what everybody's working on, how is the impact of that, et cetera. But external data on global events and things like that, we don't have too many benchmarks around that within the platform at this time, but we do allow the importing of that, and we try to make that pretty easy if you have external data that you'd like to put in. Great question.
John, do you import data and analytics and stuff like that and use it in the tool?
Yeah, so we don't do that, but two things that we do use the platform for that I think are really important. One is we do capacity surveys of our supply chain. So we'll send out a survey using the tool to our top suppliers to get an understanding of how they're able to flex. So we have this kind of aggregate data that we can basically do some risk scoring with. And the other piece is our performance supplier performance review process. And in that, we actually ask a lot of questions about where they see opportunities for cost reduction and collaboration. We've built this kind of database of opportunities that are being fed by suppliers. So it helps us kind of extract that information from the suppliers to get a better understanding. And then we use some outside benchmarks for kind of getting a better understanding where the market is for resins and other commodities.
That kind of links to one of the questions that we've got through here. So, John, do you use the tool to, so you use it to survey your suppliers? Have you ever done it, surveyed suppliers or used it in a way to gather people's appetite for sustainability goals and looking for opportunities where suppliers can really bring some innovation to the table, perhaps? Yeah,
so included in that performance review process, we do a couple of cool things. One of them, we're asking for new opportunities as it comes to cost savings, as I was saying, but we're also asking them about innovation. And then we also ask about supply chain risk. So we have these kind of open-ended questions where we're harvesting ideas as it relates to new product development, supply chain risk, and additional cost out opportunities that we review with them. And the other thing that I think is actually really a great thing to do in the effort of collaboration, we do this kind of 360 review with the suppliers where we get feedback on us as a customer. And I think that's really important to do because it's good to see how you stand compared to their other customers. And if you're really developing that customer of choice relationship that you want to make sure that you're getting the most value out of the relationship and really getting a preferred treatment that you want as a customer.
Excellent. Alex, did you want to add anything to that?
No, I more so just to compliment John on that's true partnership. You hear a lot of folks talking about that as a best practice, but we rarely see it executed. Yeah. And the fact that John's organization does that is, I think, just speaks to them as a true partner when they talk to their suppliers, talk to their stakeholders. It's notable.
Yeah, it's that true partnership type style. Yes, and we often talk about being a customer of choice, but like you say, do we often ask our suppliers whether we are? But yeah,
right. Do we act on it and make it a part of our operations? It's hard to do.
And I think it builds trust with suppliers and encourages more open conversations. When something goes wrong, they're most likely to come to you and be open and tell you when things do go wrong, and that can only be a good thing. So keeping that dialogue open both ways, really important. John, have you got what one of your most successful examples, I guess, of a sourcing project that you've run through it? So someone's asked for a real life example, but can you give us an example of a supplier or a sourcing project that really worked most effectively through the system, and why?
Yeah, I think one of the more the largest successes we've had was as it relates to resins, and conducting a sourcing event for resins, and really engaging a new group of suppliers, putting, it was a highly technical specification. We were able to bring a lot of suppliers in, feed them the information, and we delivered a lot of savings. That was in 2019. Of course, it's a very different environment now. But yeah, that was one of our first wins, and I think we actually rolled that out within 2 weeks of starting the Scout Workday strategic sourcing relationship. That I think was really set the tone for the rest of our engagements, our sourcing events. We built out these templates. We kind of standardized our process. We were able to get good supplier engagement, and and we did it fast. That kind of got the stakeholders involved. They saw how the platform worked. They were uploading documentation. They were uploading, we had supplier quality engaged. They were uploading our supplier quality manual. It was kind of setting the tone for the rest of the relationship and helped us get to this point. It was a quick win for us.
Great one. Good stuff. And we have had a question through about, where next really in terms of automation. So, automation in the RFQ process, contract management, spend analytics, etc. What are we seeing in terms of trends for what's next in terms of automation? Alex, do you want to pick that up? What kind of things are you seeing?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, for starters, I think the environmental and social governance is something that's more and more important to boards. And I think a big part of why we're asked to go and talk to our CEO and board level is folks now want to know what we're doing in terms of our supply chain and how are we, in a lot of these areas. And so we're seeing platforms being configured out of the gate and reconfigured to capture data around, first tier, second tier, and how suppliers are doing. And we're seeing decisions being made much more on these factors than they ever have been before. I think they've always been there's been an undercurrent of we want to be responsible in terms of our supply chain, but now it's a real business need because consumers are demanding it. And I think that to me, that's been super encouraging to see, and something that we've always preached as a best practice, but now we're seeing really huge adoption of that, and that's a really wonderful development. And then the other thing that we're seeing is, frankly, data connectivity. before it was kind of, you had two choices. One, you either had to go full suite, and then you would have your data in one place, depending on how you set things up, or you would go best of breed, and then you kind of have things more siloed, and you'd have to figure out how to connect all of them. What we're seeing across pretty much every industry and technology is that the technology platforms are making it really easy via APIs to make the data available. And you can connect them or you cannot connect them, but at least you now have the ability to connect them, get the data out wherever you need it. And it's just made the choices for, it really blurred the lines for both, suite or best of breed, and also blurred the lines between out of the box, functionality and basically configurability or customizability. Now those lines are all being blurred quite a bit. And I think that's a really huge, wonderful development. It's been happening for years, and now we see because pretty much every software is much more open than it has been technologically, as well as from like a business perspective.
Yeah.
I think we'll just continue to see an acceleration of that. It's really cool from a technology perspective. I think what we're going to see in the future.
And what about you, John? What kind of things are you looking at for next steps for automation for your team?
Yeah, so we are going to get more. We see opportunities for automation for our contracting process. So I think on the back end, after the supplier selection, we'd like to do more work to make sure that we're moving through a more standardized workflow. And then we do realize there's a need to continually to understand that the tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 supply chain, and really get our arms around that. So I do see, as Alex said, because there's many reasons. It's sustainability, it's understanding, who you're doing business with at a different level, and then the supply chain risk piece. We do see an opportunity to build a better understanding of our tier 2 and tier 3 supply chain, and we're kind of figuring out what's the best way to do that. How do we pull that data together, and how do we understand the risk, and how do we understand the compliance aspects as well. So that I think is going to be a big step, along with really contracts for us, and making sure that we push through a more automated workflow.
Great stuff. Alex, there's a question about the platform itself. Does the Workday platform interact with existing ERP systems or work as a standalone platform?
Yeah, great question. So it does work great standalone. That was this whole Scout platform, and that was part of the reason why it could be deployed so quickly. And we have some customers that deployed it in one day. Most of our customers deploy it within weeks, which is a really short amount of time to configure and roll it out globally. I think John's got it down to where he could deploy it in his sleep. So it totally works great standalone, and you can get it up and running and get value out of it quickly. But to what I was saying earlier about the ability to tie it into different systems via APIs, we now have APIs and connectors. Obviously, we're very tied into the Workday platform, so it's very seamless. But we, via the same rails, can connect it to any ERP platform. And again, we're super open. We always have been, and that remains under Workday as well.
Yeah, excellent. And John, have issues such as issues in delays in freight and logistics, and has that all been flagged? Have you seen that get flagged up through the system as you've been sourcing issues to problems flag up? Have you seen trends in things taking longer? Can you use this as a tool to kind of predict where things are going?
Yeah, so what we've used it as is more of a tool to understand our supply chain. So we know where we have products that are heavy dependent on transportation and logistics. For example, we have one product where if you look at the total landed cost, about 30% of it is actually tied to the the ocean cargo line from from Shanghai to Long Beach.
Mhm.
And with what has happened in the last few months, we know that that product in particular is kind of put us in a position where we're now spending 4x for that container, and it's no longer profitable, or it's almost at a break even. And it's given us that understanding of our supply chain, so we can look at the markets, we look how things are changing, and we see what the impact is quick, and then we can feed that to the business. So that's really how we're using it, is to survey our suppliers, understand our supply chain, and then we're the experts, and we communicate that.
Great. And do you use the platform for supplier performance evaluation? And can you set your own criteria?
Yeah, so we do. We absolutely do. And that's what I was discussing. Not only do we do the supplier performance, we have a form, and we engage our stakeholders, which they really appreciate. We have supplier quality providing their feedback. We have our tactical buying function providing their feedback. And we get this kind of holistic view of performance of the supplier from each of the different functions. But then we also give them the 360 review of us, which is great. How do they view us as a customer compared to their others, as it relates to response to quality issues, order communication, all of these different things. And that really facilitates some great discussion. It doesn't eliminate the need to actually sit down and talk to your suppliers, but it allows us to have a really good discussion.
I guess it helps focus that discussion, doesn't it? Yeah, got the information
Absolutely
to your fingertips. Great. Are there any disadvantages of automation on supplier relationship management, particularly on the strategic suppliers? Good question.
Yeah, that's a great question. When we first rolled out Workday Strategic Sourcing, we had to be very clear, because I've done this several times. If you are inviting suppliers to participate in the sourcing event for the first time, it's still important to talk to them and connect with them, and at least have a discussion about what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Because you don't want them to feel that you're trying to take the relationship out of the picture completely, and that's not the goal. It's just you're trying to automate the communication and make things faster, but you don't want them to feel that they're not valued. So as part of our standard process, we always have a discussion with the supplier before they see the Scout invite or the Workday Strategic Sourcing invite to the event, so they know it's coming, and then also don't feel that we just dismiss the value of the relationship. But that is a risk, and that was a concern by a lot of stakeholders when we first implemented. But I can tell you that suppliers now prefer the platform, because it just makes things so much easier for them to respond to, and they can, within their organization, also collaborate in a response, which is great.
Excellent. Brilliant. Well, thank you. Go on. Sorry, Alex.
Well, just to that question, just a follow-up question to John, if it's okay. But
sure.
One of the challenges that you see with any new technology when you implement it is just you have folks who not used technology before, or had a bad experience with technology in the past, and maybe it was many years ago. How did you're new in this organization, you're bringing in a new technology, it works, but you got to bring the rest of the organization along. Was that a challenge in your organization as well?
Yeah, so it's a challenge until you get somebody to actually log in and use the platform, because that's
the hardest part.
That's the one thing you guys got it right. The user interface is simple, and it is so intuitive that somebody who has had very limited experience with technology can walk through the process, and it's very easy. So I think adoption was actually, when we go way back to the start of our relationship, adoption was the reason that my client originally partnered with Scout RFP before becoming Workday Strategic Sourcing, because once someone actually sits in the platform, it is so simple. It doesn't overcomplicate things, and it is intuitive. And I think that's the key to any technology. We've spent lots of money, and that other companies I've worked for as well, we've spent lots of money on technology solutions that no one uses. And that's so important. because when you get the buy-in and you get the stakeholders using the platform, then that's really when you see the benefits. So incredibly important.
Yeah, I think it's almost as much time with the implementation of the system is needed with the culture change and the hearts and minds really of getting people to buy into the systems is required. I think we've seen a lot of technology projects fail where they haven't really got that right. And I guess having it as user friendly as the Workday platform is one of those barriers that you don't really have to jump over. So it's kind of just once you've got people's buy-in and they can see how simple it is to use, then hopefully you're plain sailing from there on. Alex and John, thank you very much indeed. That was really great, and thank you for all the questions that have come through. We've shared some links in the chat. So we've shared the link to the Harvard Business Review white paper that Alex mentioned, and that's on procurement's role in digital acceleration. So please feel free to download that paper in the link there. And also Workday are joining us for part 3 of the seminar series on high performing procurement, which will be on about proactive supplier management, and that's on the 7th of December. So don't forget to tune in and join us there. And we're also partnering with us on Supply Management Insider on a webinar on the power of procurement to drive positive change. And both of those links are in the chat there. Thank you very much for everyone for being so interactive and sending some questions through. I've been watching the chat as well with great interest. As I mentioned, we've recorded this session, and we'll send that recording to you. That'll be available from next week, so you can watch back again or share with your colleagues. And then don't also forget that when we send it through, those links to the ones that you've already missed, and catch the next one that's coming up. So John and Alex, thank you very much for your insights. That has been a really interesting conversation. So thank you very much, and we'll see you all next time.